And Vicky, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special meeting of the Silicon Valley branch of AAUW. My name is Vicki Reeder. I'm one of the leaders of this is a new branch that was formerly known as Los Altos Mountain View and Palo Alto AAUW branches who have now merged. And we're delighted that you have joined us here today to have a discussion about this topic that we pulled out of our hat back in the glory days of October when things were looking so exciting for us as women. And but there was always the worry that something else could take place, and now we know that it did. I just want to read a statement, and then I will let Amy introduce our speaker. This is from Frederica Irwin, who's the president of the National Women's History Museum in Washington, D.C. Women have faced setbacks before, yet each time they have rallied together, breaking new ground and driving change. After every challenge, we've seen women step forward and lead, from the historic year of the woman in 1992 to the record number of women in Congress today. Just 4 years ago, 6 remarkable women vied for the Democratic presidential nomination, showcasing the breadth of talent, vision, and leadership women bring to our national landscape. Now more than ever, we must be deliberate in our efforts and to support one another and foster a sense of unity that drives progress. So those are some nice stirring words. I must say that having been a member of AAUW for over 50 years, the sign I saw on many of the marches that said, "My arms are tired from holding this sign for so many years," kind of applies to me personally. So, but I, in general, think that we must indeed move forward and try to take a leadership role in what happens to our country and the women that live here, our daughters and granddaughters. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Amy Hom, who is co-director of public policy for California AAUW, and she will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Vicki. We are so lucky today to have Meghan Kissell address our group. Meghan is AAUW's Senior Director of Policy and Member Advocacy. She leads AAUW's mission-driven policy work at the federal level and supports the grassroots advocacy work of AAUW's membership network. Meghan has a long history with AAUW, having previously worked with the policy department before returning in 2023 to head up policy and member advocacy. In addition to her work at AAUW National, Meghan is also a member of her local branch in Alexandria, Virginia. Meghan is particularly proud of her work to expand LGBTQ equality in the Deep South with the Human Rights Campaign. She's also proud of her work with the Conservation Lands Foundation, which resulted in the successful protection of more than 5 million acres of public land in California and the Western United States. Meghan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Amy, thank you. And thank everybody. I want to thank everybody here for being on, for working through the exhaustion and the angst that the election brought us. To be here for the conversation. And Vicki, I feel like the quote that you shared is a much more eloquent way of what I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, that this is definitely the time that we need to focus on our principles when things are hard, and we know they're going to be hard. And I'm looking at this from a federal lens. So I am not this, to your point, this is not where we thought we would be. I had a whole set of plans that looked very different with the optimism of what we could be achieving. And instead we'll be in a defensive mode. Now, if I could take a point of personal privilege, Amy read the last part of my bio. I worked for a conservation organization in Durango, Colorado well, I was on the East Coast, but I worked for this organization in Colorado for 7 years. And 7 years ago today, I was actually in Salt Lake City while the newly elected President Trump was undoing conservation protections for an area called Bears Ears National Monument. So I've seen the impact in a whole slew of areas that we care about in many, many ways. Amy and I were chatting earlier, today's Supreme Court case on the care for transgender students. These types of issues are only becoming more prominent rather than less. These culture, what we used to refer to just as culture war issues, now seem to be the center of attention. So I just wanted to share, here's what I'd like to do this evening. I'd like to share a little bit of my perspective from DC about what we see, what we've seen with the election. And we all read the news, and I'm not going to talk down to you, and let you know where we are as AAUW, especially at the national level. And I see Kathy Harper's here, and I will also talk a little bit about what the Public Policy Committee at the association level, the National Public Policy Committee is doing and has been looking at. So Kathy, when we talk about that, I invite you to join in and give you a sense of what to expect from the national office. And then I would love to hear from all of you. What are the issues that you are concerned about? And really have a dialogue, because this really is about, as Vicki was reading, being deliberate and how we are going to go forward. So with that, as I started to say, this is not the way that we thought the election was going to go. I was in many coalition meetings, and we were planning for a number of different scenarios, but a Republican trifecta with the White House, the Senate flipping by 4 seats, and the House staying with the Republicans was not one that we spent a lot of time with. Might have been a little too optimistic. And what did we see from the election? We saw that nobody is surprised. We are still an amazingly divided country. I am not smart enough to look back and to tell anybody today on December 4th what happened. I think there's going to be a lot of time and a lot of conversation. I will say, as I look around, one thing that we do know is that white women and Black women broke in very different ways during this election. And I want to acknowledge that, because we're at the national level, we're in coalitions where this has already been discussed, that we're going to have some trust rebuilding that we need to do. We're going to need to have conversations and really find where the shared values are and how are we moving forward. Kathy and Amy also heard me say earlier today, I'm going to look, part of my work life is to look at the universe in 2-year chunks. Yes, we have the incoming President Trump, President-elect Trump for 4 years. However, we have the next Congress is only there for 2, and a lot of things can change after that. So I will be a little bit more focused on the 2 years. But I also wanted to give you a sense that there's potentially a lot of things that might happen in the next several weeks. Congress has to finish funding the government by December 30th. And then the incoming Congress will actually need to do something about the debt ceiling by January 2nd. Again, I'm a little thrown because technically the 119th Congress doesn't come in until the 3rd, but they will sort this out. But we have a couple of must-do bills that have to happen. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll see a lot of other bipartisan movement during this lame duck session. So where does this put us for the 119th Congress? Republican trifecta. This doesn't bode well. We're going to be very much on the defensive. And when it comes to education, that's really where our focus pretty much has to be. That we are seeing civil rights attacks on individuals within the education system that do permeate beyond. But from a national perspective, we're extremely concerned about the qualifications for the nominee for the Secretary of Education. that you will hear a lot about that. We haven't made a firm recommendation leaning in one direction, but we're still doing our due diligence to look at Linda McMahon's background. I will say that she is a person with very limited education experience, having spent 1 year on Connecticut State School Board, but she has been quite vocal in opposition to the new Title IX rules that were rolled out earlier this year. She's been very vocal in the past about really looking at higher education as workforce development. And I'm not saying that that's bad, but then when you start taking things like Pell Grant money away from students who are attending 2- and 4-year institutions and pulling that money over into short-term programs, if she was suggesting do both, make sure that students have all the opportunities available to them, but to say we're frustrated with quote unquote elite institutions, and therefore we're not going to give them funding. We're going to shift funding into workplace development programs versus degree programs. That really is taking something away from students who are trying to, who have already been admitted to and have worked hard to get or working hard to get a degree. So this notion of a potential Secretary of Education who has a very limited view of what higher education is, has a very limited view of what civil rights protections all students deserve when they're in their educational environments. Those are the issues that make me concerned, and that we're in many coalition meetings, and that's going to be one of our first big fights. Second big fight is definitely going to be about Title IX. Couple of things about Title IX. The first Trump administration showed its hand. They showed how restrictive they would like Title IX to be. They showed that they want the most limited version of Title IX that they could possibly reasonably get away with. They excluded sexual assault and harassment if it was 2 feet over the campus lines. If a person was in off-campus housing, that was not a Title IX violation. So if a student was in a program overseas for a semester, not a Title IX violation. The schools could turn a blind eye. And what you heard conservative commentators saying was this was all in. There were also significant changes to the due process rules in terms of how misconduct was investigated with schools under the auspices of due process. That we were going to, that one side was saying due process, but I would actually say it was really a rape myth that women must be lying about these things, and therefore they must be thoroughly examined to make sure that they were not lying about situations. And this is the opposite of what we should be doing to create healthy educational environments. Regarding Title IX, that's not going to change overnight. That the attacks on Title IX have to go through a fairly robust rules process. Unfortunately, I do think that the incoming Trump administration will move quite a bit faster than the Biden administration, which is incredibly unfortunate because the Biden administration dragged their feet for about 3 years working on their process. And that's why we only saw the new rules come out in April of this year. I anticipate we would see something much faster, probably within the first year, probably starting that process as early as 2025. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity to really be weighing in. We can anticipate the rollbacks, but we know that we're going to need to keep fighting for not allowing these situations to be normalized and not allowing reversal of rights to be normalized. And this will be hard because I do not think we're going to win all of these battles. And Title IX is actually one that, if I am being honest with you, I think we are going to end up taking 3 gigantic steps backwards before we have an opportunity to go forwards again. So we're going to need to do other things in our communities to make sure that students are safe and protected. I'm guessing that many people have also heard about the elimination of the Department of Education. This is not something that can happen overnight. It can happen, but even without that, that does take congressional effort, but there's a heck of a lot of damage that could be done even if you don't eliminate the Department of Education. You could diminish the Department of Education and really hamstring the good works that it does by limiting its funding, by eliminating staffing. So there really are going to be probably some of the less exciting appropriations battles and things that we will probably be leaning into more, because that's where some of the purse strings are going to drive where we actually have staffing in some of the federal agencies that are so critical to our work. And as I said, also on education, we're going to continue having fights about public education versus privatizing education, both at the K-12 level and at the higher ed level. So we're going to continue to see this effort towards, is higher education nothing more than workforce development? Or is it more than that? And if it's more than that, who gets the opportunity to be part of that? Is it only those that can afford it? Or are we saying to folks who are lower income, may not have as many means, no, you can, if this is what path you want to go on, here you have financial aid efforts, you have Pell Grants, you've got work study programs, you have other support programs to help certain students thrive, get to a place where they can be in higher education and thrive. These are all pieces that, quite frankly, have been under attack at the federal level prior to November. So we expect a continuation of these attacks, but there are some in Congress who are going to feel like they have got a mandate to do anything that they want. And I don't think that that's actually what the election said. If you want my personal view, I think that there was a lot of confusion about what was being said through this election. And if the current cabinet nominee picks are any indication, we're in for a bit of a wild ride for a while. So it's going to be a challenge. I could probably list just within education about 16 more items. The thing that I also wanted to share with everybody, and then I'll pause for a moment, is I want you to know what to expect from AUW National, which is that we're not going to chase every problematic thing that the incoming administration intends to do. And that's going to really vex some people. And I acknowledge that. And I want to let you know, let me know when you're really frustrated. I'll let you know why we might be holding our tongue. But if we start chasing every rabbit, we're going to be exhausted. Our members will be exhausted. We'll lose our focus, and we're going to have to really keep our eyes on where the big issues are and where we have an opportunity for unique impact and where we're going to have a really valuable voice. I know that you do this at the local level and at the state level on a regular basis. You're constantly, even if you don't think about it in those terms, you're constantly making those evaluations. Where is our time best spent? And that's one of the things that with Amy and folks like Kathy, that we are looking at across the country of where is AUW's voice collectively at the federal level? Where's our voice best spent? Where will we have the most impact? So I'm not going to say that that's not going to be frustrating, because there's going to be a lot of valuable issues that we care about and we want to stay focused. And that's going to be part of the hardest thing over the next year or two. I think we're going to see a lot of crazy. We saw a lot of crazy come out of the 118th Congress. There wasn't a wild issue that didn't get a bill introduced and passed. The House did everything that it wanted to, but there was a backstop in the Senate. That backstop isn't fully there now. So will we see crazy thrive? Or will we see the Senate continue to put guardrails? Also, the House majority is so slim that there really is room to maneuver here. So I don't want anybody to hear, oh my gosh, there's a Republican trifecta, we're doomed. It's going to be hard, but we're not doomed. And while I highly recommend that we don't exhaust ourselves and chase every opportunity or every perceived threat, at the same time, we also need to make sure that we're not normalizing outrageous behavior and that we're not normalizing casting certain individuals aside, that certain members of our community cannot be cast aside in favor of what this different version of America is. So that's going to be the balance. How do we not let crazy slide and hold the powder dry for important steps forward? This is not a science, and I think we're really going to need to work on this all together. And that's where I always want to hear feedback. And I think Amy and Kathy know I'm very interested in hearing from folks to see which direction we're going. You have a better sense of your communities. I have a sense of certain communities, but I am not as familiar with yours. What's resonating with you? And how can I help all of you be the most effective advocates possible? One thing that I did want to just note too is that when I started back at AAUW almost 2 years ago, that we changed the title of my role of Senior Director of Public Policy and member advocacy. So I am here just as much to make sure that you are effective as we are collectively to make sure that AUW is effective in public policy. I've seen a couple of things in the chat, but of course I didn't have it up at the same time. Let me take I'm going to pause, look at this, but if anybody wants to jump in with a question while we're taking a look at what's in the chat, please feel free. So
Maybe,
one,
can you read some of the questions in the chat
yes, I'll read them out loud.
or whatever, some way? Yeah, like that.
So Toby was asking if AUW will take a position about Bibles in the class and teaching religion in public schools. AUW has a position on this, that there should be a separation of church and state, and that educational environments should be free of bias, and that includes religious bias. Will we nationally be weighing in here as much? Probably not. And that's because the focus at the national level will be much more on the higher education components, because quite frankly, members like yourselves at the local level will have much more of an impact with school boards, with your state boards of education. And we're seeing more of those battles there. If we saw a federal effort to start putting up the 10 Commandments in all public schools, yes, we would be weighing in. But I did want to let you know what to expect of some of these fights will be more centered at the local and state level. Teresa was asking about HR 9495, its ramifications. Now, I am not completely up on my bill numbers, but I believe, and Teresa, please tell me if I'm correct, that this is the bill that many people may have seen some emails about in the past few weeks, where there's a discussion that the Department of Treasury could revoke a C3 status. I'm not sure if I see Teresa in.
That's okay. Yeah, it's that's the one I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
I hadn't committed the number to heart. This bill right now is a bit of a Frankenstein. It was a bill that was not It didn't look like this shape when it was originally introduced in the Senate. This was not something that we were going to weigh in on. It got to the House in the 118th Congress and took a very different turn. This is actually a bill that its original core intention was to very much aimed at attacking protesters who were looking at what was happening between Israel and Hamas. And the bill is written it's a very poorly constructed bill that essentially says a Department of Treasury deems an entity, they would have carte blanche to name an entity funding, engaging with terrorist acts and revoke the C3 status. Because of how broadly it is written, it really is very problematic. No, this is not the top of our list, but as organizational self-preservation, yes, we are following this. So not necessarily something that you're likely to see a 2-minute activist email on, but it is something that we're tracking from an internal perspective. So the other part of the question was, would we have a First Amendment case if AAUW's tax status is revoked? I'm going to leave that to some smarter folks, but there has been a lot of movement in the past just in the past 2 weeks in terms of weakening support. There was significantly weakening support in the Senate for this bill because people are now understanding how broad it is and how this bill has gotten away from them. But this is a way that government agencies could be weaponized. So it's something we'll be tracking. I'm not going to say that we're suddenly going to become working on all tax, focused solely on our tax status, but we'll be keeping everybody informed. And the one thing I will say about this, though, is many folks have heard me prior to the election really being mindful about making sure that we were being nonpartisan. But being nonpartisan does not make us values neutral. We have a strong perspective. And all of you are taking an hour out of your day today because you care deeply about these issues, about education, economic opportunity, civil rights, and social justice. These are issues that we feel strongly about, and we should absolutely not back down and not feel like this is a specter to prevent anybody from speaking up and fighting things that are really against our values. I'm sorry, I'm pausing because I'm reading. Phyllis was asking a related question about, does AUW have a concern about being targeted for shutdown as a nonprofit? We are not acting out of fear. We will be acting we're going to be acting out of the basis of our values, and we will be speaking up as vocally as to make sure that our voices are being heard through the halls of Congress, and we're not going to be cowed by this threat. Also, if I'm being honest, I don't think we're at the top of the list. And I realize that branches and states, we're all looking at a tax status. I'm not saying go forth with no fear, but don't let the fear of this prevent you from being advocates. There was another question about, is there a list of most important issues to fight for? And is there agreement? Joyce, this is a great question. I've referenced the fact that AUW has a set of public policy principles, and these are affirmed by members every 2 years. And this is actually a conversation that is actively happening right now. Kathy Harper is also a member of the Public Policy Committee. And just so you know the process, we currently have a set of public policy principles that were voted on 2 years ago that go through from 2023 to 2025. So those are what we're looking at right now. And I can drop those in the chat so everybody has the link to those. But these are very reminiscent of AAUW California's public policy principles. They're very much related. Do people have their favorites, and is there universal agreement as to where we prioritize? I am not going to imply that there is universal agreement, but all of the decisions that we're making at the federal level is really based on where we have expertise, where we have a unique voice, and where we have an opportunity for change. So it's not going to be everybody's #1 list, but that's why I wanted to let you know that we really are centering education and higher education because of our expertise in this area. But Kathy, since I can see you on screen, is there anything that you would like to say from the Public Policy Committee's perspective on that process?
Thanks, Megan. I would just kind of inform our members of how the process works. It's a matter of the committee, the National Committee, working in conjunction with Megan and our membership. So it's input from all 3 sources that inform our public policy priorities for the following 2 years. We're working on those right now. Our committee's been working overtime, I would say, getting these ready because they have to go to the board very soon for approval before they go out to membership for your input and voting. But the one thing that the reason that we work so closely with Megan is because the nationals, I would say even much more so than the state public policy priorities, are really driven by the bandwidth within the national organization. When we establish our principles and priorities, we're basically giving direction to Megan and her team of these are the things that membership wants you to be working on. And so we really need her input to tell us these are the things we can do and these are the things that we can't do. So that's a big chunk of the process combined with the input that we get from all of our members. So I just wanted to throw that out to you and just remind you that when those are finalized and they come out for member input, if there's anything that you feel really strongly about, make sure that you take the time to comment and give us your input, and we will re-examine the work that we've done in light of the input that we get from membership. Thanks, Megan.
And you will all be seeing those in January, so keep an eye out for those. And it'll be a month-long public comment period. Well, member comment period. Clarify that. Sorry, when I'm looking to the side, Toby was asking about being more specific about when I say higher education. And I appreciate the question. That could be anything, right? We really are looking at, oh geez, I had my notes too. Now, this is actually something that the Public Policy Committee has been looking at, and my team's been talking to our coalition partners in this space. At the moment, the biggest threats really are, it's definitely evolving, but Title IX is always going to be primary. And yes, that is a K-12 issue as well. So, but we're looking at it from both perspectives. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is something that you're going to hear more from us from the national office. That, messaging bills like the one that was referenced here from JD Vance about the Dismantle DEI Act. We're seeing a lot of, there have been messaging bills also introduced about dismantling Department of Education, but that was a one-line bill that actually had no legitimacy as a bill, but some of them do. And these are pieces that we are going to fight for, because fighting for diversity, equity, and inclusion means that students are able to, students who want a degree are able to get there, are welcome, safe, and thrive. no matter who they are, no matter where they're from, and regardless of what the institution is. So the fact that DEI, that acronym, has become a dirty word, DEI, woke, it used to be CRT, all of these words are being weaponized. And it's really important for us to keep talking about the importance of diversity and the importance of fact-based, history, curriculum, making sure that all students are welcome and thriving. That there was a conversation recently from, just earlier this week, from one of the equal opportunity commissioners, equal employment opportunity commissioners, the EEOC, and they were talking. This particular commissioner was talking about how she was kind of doing a road tour with one of the more conservative commissioners. And the conservative commissioner said, you got to stop using DEI. Just, if you talk about equal opportunity, equal employment, because this was in the employment center, she said, well, we agree with that. But when you call it this other thing, that's what gets our back up. So one of the things that we're going to have to do is really look at the language that we're using and how do we evaluate our language so that we are not stepping back from our values, that we are not excluding some of the most vulnerable students, perhaps, that were just as forceful, but I should say, and we're finding ways to at least begin the conversations, because most people are in agreement, but now we've created this frenzy over something that most people can't even define. So when it comes to attacks in general on higher education, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, on Title IX, that is an area that we are going to be all in on. I anticipate you may hear less from the national office about student loan debt because it'll be a bit of a shift in a focus, because some of those efforts are going to be dead in the water with this Congress and this administration. However, there will be opportunities to be looking at affordable access to education. There is some bipartisan support on doubling Pell Grants. Despite the fact that there's efforts to eliminate work-study programs, there is support there. Looking at what are the different factors that are preventing different groups of women from achieving success in higher education. The lack of affordable childcare is definitely one of those pieces. Making sure that folks who are working and going to school have access to paid leave. You will still see us weighing in on these issues because these are factors that will help various people thrive in their education. So I think we'll see a shift on some things. As I said, I don't think there's going to be as much movement on student debt relief, but there may be more on the funding side. We also we'll definitely be leaning more into the attacks on diversity. And I am peeking through. Sandra was asking if AAUW is aware of the recently published report, Ours to Solve Once and Forever, Securing the Outcomes Our Students Need, from Education Futures Council at the Hoover Institute, which advocates major reform and supports charter schools. Does AAUW need to revisit the charter school issues? I would back up and say, should all issues on a regular basis be evaluated to see where we are right now? In general, yes. Will AAUW National be focused on charter schools? If we see a real particular need, possibly, but you'll see less of our work on the K-12 space than you would on the higher ed space. And this is an issue that's going to fall more in the K-12 space. But and the reason I don't sound like I'm giving a straight answer is I've realized this fall that I have a failure of imagination to how wild some of the attacks can be. And I've had a bit of a failure of imagination to just see how weird the nominees for different positions are. So I don't want to rule out and say definitively, no, we're not going to be looking at charter schools. Because if there's something absolutely wild that we're going to start sending Bibles to all public schools, that we're going to turn everything over to all education funding, block grant to states to do charters and vouchers, we're seeing really bad outcomes for states that are going in this direction. It's not serving students well. But I don't anticipate in the next 6 months that this is where we're going to lean into, but we are in coalitions and we are working with folks who are tracking the K-12 space much more closely than we are. And that's why we're trying to kind of really pick where we can focus most. So that's my non-answer, but you're not going to see us lead on this, but we're certainly in coalitions that will keep us informed. I'm scrolling around to see if there's other specific pieces. So, Sina, I'm wondering if there's a question or a comment in the chat, and I don't know if this is actually in reference to AAUW as a whole, or if we're talking about society as a whole, but let me read this out for everybody. That Sina writes, I'm concerned that we're moving away from assuring public schools are giving equal opportunity, diversity, etc. Students entering college must have the opportunity for college prep at the high school and lower levels. An example are the school boards with extreme religious right board members in the majority and the fear to teach historically accurate history. I'm wondering if that's more of a societal concern than an AUW concern, because I would say from AUW's perspective, we're not backing down from this at all. This is a bit of the heart and soul. When I see this, there is an element to me that I see Title IX. Title IX is actually one way of providing some equitable opportunities in education. It's not the only way. And yes, when I say we're going to focus on Title IX and we're focused mostly on higher ed, we're not only focused on Title IX for higher ed, it's all. But I do share the concern personally that there are communities around the country that have taken a step to the right with many school boards. I really do appreciate Kathy sharing what California has been doing with the school board project with our members around the country earlier this spring, because this is happening. And it's not something AAUW National can impact, because that's actually where you can have the impact. You are the tip of the spear on this. You are close. You are the community members. You are there in your communities. You're the eyes, you're the ears, hopefully. And keeping an eye on this and raising your voice. So you're the ones who are able to keep a better track on this. But when there are ways that National can assist and make your advocacy more effective, that's also part of what we're here to do. But Kathy, I see you've got a hand up, so let me defer to you.
Thanks, Megan. I did just want to comment on that really briefly. I wanted to assure our members, even though if you share these concerns that National may be pulling back a little bit on K through 12, I just want you to be assured that we are addressing that at the state level. The school board project is alive and well, and we'll be continuing our work through the next fiscal year all the way into 2025. And the best way to have an impact is to get involved. So when you get messages from us at the public policy, AUW California Public Policy Committee level, please pay attention to those. If these are issues that you care about at the K through 12 level, we need you to help us. We need you to respond to our surveys. We need your eyes and ears out there in your communities with your school boards to let us know what's happening. And that gives us a direction as to formulating policies and procedures that we can effectuate in order to help you in your communities, but we can't do it without your engagement. So just wanted to remind everybody of that. Thanks.
And I appreciate you saying that, because I don't want anybody to have the impression that AUW is backing away from our core principles on education. Our principles on education are not changing. We, in fact, this is what you'll be seeing next month for the public policy. The public policy principles really is this framework that lays out very clearly our belief in public education, that our belief in, oh, I see, I didn't think to have it sitting in front of me, but we do lay this out, that we are committed to an accessible, public, diverse K-12 and accessible and diverse and affordable quality higher education. So this isn't a matter of picking and choosing. Part of what I'm sharing with you, because I will be nothing if not very transparent with you. We haven't been at the federal level doing a lot of the K-12 work, aside from being in we occasionally are in coalitions with different organizations that are very focused, that we will continue to be on sign-on letters. But what you won't see is more in-depth work, more in-depth activation, unless we see an opportunity for a real impact there. So it's not backing off of that as a core principle of how we feel about education, but it is an honest recognition that you haven't seen us been doing this probably in more than 5 years. So it's really just a better assessment of what we're doing and where we'll be, what we anticipate some of the attacks are. There's two related questions, I believe. I'm going to group them together, but please tell me if you think that I need to further elaborate. But we do get the question a lot about what organizations does National work with? And that's actually something that we are going to be trying to figure out how to share better with folks like Amy. And so that we can share that out. Our coalitions are not, the coalition partners, they're not a secret, although I definitely don't have a list of every member of every coalition that we're in. I can tell you that, I'm next week meeting with, we have a coalition on pregnant and parenting students. And there's a very particular group of organizations that work on that aspect. When we were looking at Title IX being rolled out, there was several different types of education coalitions that were coming together. Folks who work more closely with the LGBTQ, more centered with the LGBTQ community, the folks who are working with pregnant and parenting students, folks who are working with sexual assault survivors. So there's a lot of individual organizations, some of which have a national presence. We probably don't have, we're not in a lot of coalitions that have state members per se, but by sharing that information about who some of those coalition partners on these different topics, I personally think it would be a great opportunity for you to see who is in your community and who the potential allies are on different issues. So that is definitely something that we're looking to keep moving, to actually share more out with you. So Claire was asking about the ERA and John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I could probably come up with like Paycheck Fairness Act. I could throw a number of bills that like things that we've seen come in over and over again. Let me separate ERA for just a moment. But do we anticipate the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act? Do we anticipate things like the Paycheck Fairness Act and some of the paid family leave bills? Absolutely. Even though we don't anticipate them to get all the way through the House and Senate during the 119th Congress. And the reason for that, and the reason you will still see us send out 2-minute activist alerts when these bills are introduced, is because this really sets a precedent. A bill that has been introduced for a number of years that takes a break has a really hard time coming back. So even when the minority party knows that it's a snowball's chance in the Mojave of going forward, that there's still a real benefit to making sure the bills are continuously introduced. So there are some bills that I know that the Lobby Corps members on the East Coast are like, well, we've been doing this one for years. And I'm like, yes, because we want to demonstrate a strong record, because 2 years is not that far away and we might see a different House. And even if we had a split House and Senate, that's still momentum that we would want to keep up. So having the continued reintroduction of those bills is a definite yes. The ERA is very different because the ERA is not just a bill. The ERA is I'm always trying to figure out what is my 3-minute version of a complicated situation. The ERA right now is in a very precarious position, and you will see a tremendous amount of attention focused on having Joe Biden do everything that he can in his power, including, while the 119th Congress is still there, including pressuring Congress to pass a resolution that affirmatively waives the ratification deadline for the 28th Amendment. But after Congress leaves, the ask really is, would Joe Biden instruct the archivist? There are some legal hurdles. I don't want to say that there's legal hurdles. There's differing legal opinions that the White House has heard about the ability for the archivist to publish the ERA right now. And that's creating the challenge. That's creating what feels like a barrier. I do want to let you know that we're in with allies to really push this forward. And I want to also let you know that if we don't see this published by the 20th of January, this is probably a couple of years setback, but it's not doomed forever. So there is still going to be a fight, but I can tell you we are not going to, if we do not see the ERA published before January 20th, we might see a congressional resolution introduced again in the 119th Congress, but it will not get any traction whatsoever. The current makeup of the 119th Congress, the incoming Congress, would not be amenable to moving forward that resolution. We haven't been able to get the resolution out of the 118th Congress, and this is the most momentum we've had. So we're at least at a 2-year setback, possibly 4. So it's not lost. The urgency is right now. And then the asks are going to evolve of like, there's a different ask right now between now and December 20th. There's an ask that's all Biden all the way between December 20th and January 20th. And then we reevaluate. If we are not there, we reevaluate and we move forward. Joyce was asking that it sounds like local, state, and national are expected to carry more of their weight and doing more so with national backing up with the fires that need to be fought. I will be be really honest with you. I don't know that this is a new expectation. The first time I worked at AAUW, I was AAUW's field director in the policy department. And this wasn't an expectation. This was a collaboration of how we were working together at the local, state, and national level. It's the only way we've ever been effective, and it's the only way that we will be effective, is by collaborating together. I have talked to members in different parts of the country who've said, well, national can do that. I'm not that powerful, and I have no power without all of you and without all of us. So I don't see this as a shift. I mean, this is a perspective of I've been here before and I'm here again. And this isn't actually that different, but I don't know if it's just that there's more fights that have to go on at the local level too, that we're at a very different place in our society and how we're looking at equity and education, and especially for some of the most vulnerable individuals in our communities. But what I would say is, yes, national has RAC, and in the ways that we can help work with Amy and all of you to say, hey, how can we be most effective? Yeah, that's what we're here for. But we are not a set of K Street lobbyists. So the power of AAUW is the power of our unified voice together. If that feels like we're shifting responsibility, I would say it's always been a shared responsibility, and it's how we've been successful in the past and how we can be successful in our defense going forward.
Megan, thank you very, very much. I'm looking at the clock and it is just 5 o'clock Pacific time, and we have to conclude. And those were stirring words, so thank you for those, and thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. Thank you to all who joined. This is quite impressive to see so many, some familiar, lots of unfamiliar faces here, lots of people and lots of interest. We have one final slide to put before you. Our branch is putting on an event we've done for about 15 years on the anniversary of the Roe decision on January 22nd. We'd love to see you back with us. I can't tell you what time that day because I'm still negotiating with finding a speaker. I have some asks out that I have to pursue. So you can find us, and we'll find you too, to give you further information. Do you have any last words, Amy, before we conclude?
No, I just want to thank Megan so much. It was a really interesting and informative conversation. So Megan, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all for coming.
And I put my email address in the chat. Please feel free to reach out, and thank you.
Okay, go out there, everyone, and
Sorry, Vicki, can I say something just really, really quick? We talked about Title IX, and I just want to let you all know that there's a presentation on Title IX on the comparison of the old rules and the new rules, and that's been posted on our website. So if you're interested, take a look at the public policy page and you'll find it there. Thanks.
Okay, Amy, you have the button to make everyone disappear. So over to you.
All right. Thank you all so much.